Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink I have in the sample form. It's by Diamine, Aqua Blue, which, amusingly enough, is actually just blue. It's not an aqua color, it's just blue. Yep. And the two pens I used were these. This Knox Plato, and it had a broad nib in it at the time. Now it has a oblique, quote-unquote, double broad. Although, if you can find the oblique in that, I'd be surprised. And this Knox Avicenna with an extra fine nib, but I'm pretty sure I can get this on camera. You see that gap? This seems to happen with pretty much all my Knox fines and extra fines. I just can't get the feed and the nib to line up properly, so the only way they'll write is if they are pretty wet, and they are pretty wet, so that may cause some problems later. Now, thought I'd try to find some inks that are comparable. So here's Diamine's Aqua Blue. You can see that it's pretty turquoisey, except, you know, without any green in it. So here's Ackerman's number 11. Travis turquoise. I just massacred that. And here's Private Reserve's Daphne Blue. Here's Schaefer turquoise. Here's Pelican's 4001 turquoise. We're finally seeing a little bit of change because that one's just a touch darker. Noodler's Navajo turquoise, which is definitely a little bit darker. Toucan's Bright Blue, which is very similar but still maybe a bit darker. And Lamy turquoise, which is still maybe a little bit darker. Yep. Let's check out the chromatography. I can talk. So here's the normal chromatography. Pointy thing. You can very vaguely make out where that initial drop was put. And if you can make that out, you can see that there's a tiny, tiny haze of barely there blue. And then there's light blue, and then right up at the top there's this teeny bit of darkening blue. And here I let it dry, which is not how you're supposed to do it. And it is the same. Maybe the haze is tiny, just a hair's breadth darker. There's less of a separation, and the thing at the top is maybe a tiny bit less dark. Not a whole lot of difference. Now, thought I'd see what this ink could hold up against. Denatured alcohol did absolutely nothing, but it was before I removed it from the test. Water did a lot, and in fact, it cleaned out of these pens almost ridiculously easily. So ammonia pen flush definitely got it moving. 1/3 bleach solution really started to break it up, but I had to wipe it up before I started to eat through the paper. And hydrogen peroxide really obliterated it. I was kind of surprised by that, but yeah. Alright, so paper test. Top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Now, I've moved away from this specific type of paper. I got it in these little Clairefontaine spiral notebooks that I got when I was still in Italy. And I bought them for test before I got that big green thing, but yeah. As I've said in a couple of other videos, like the edge of paper is sort of like imagine a slow leak in a tire, but it lets in environmental factors. So everywhere there's an edge to paper is a place where things can get in to sort of mess up how a paper works. So yeah, we get some of that here. You can see along the edge we have a couple of dots. But since for the most part it's just fine, I thought I'd keep moving, but still, just to let you know. Now, something to note about this ink, in my experience at least, because although this is a fairly wet extra fine, and although this is I'd say just slightly wet Play-Doh, regardless of the nib that's in it, this was when I was testing it, was a whole new level of wet. I mean, it was flying out of the pen, which I feel like you can probably see in those smears. That extra fine crossed 3 layers of Sayers lines, and that broad actually went off the page. But yeah, the extra fine took 16 seconds to dry. The broad took 27. You do get a halo effect, but because this ink was so wet, it was putting down so much ink that you don't really get shading. Like, yeah, where is it? There are pools in its wake. Like, it would lay down such a layer of ink that, like, there was, imagine just like a little bubble of ink along all of these lines, and so it would just like, yeah, anyways, it was really intense. So we don't get a ton of shading, but we do get some halo. It's a very bright blue. I hope that comes through. If I have to, I'll fix it in post, but this is a really eye-popping blue. If you like light blues, this is a good one. It is not undersaturated per se. There are areas where it almost starts to look like maybe it is, and here you can make out those lines a little bit, but for the most part, I wouldn't necessarily call it undersaturated. Now, again, this is the bottom of the page. It is along the edge, so some of this weirdness you can ignore. But yeah, not a lot of water resistance like we saw. It's kind of patchy. And Now, next up is Fabriano paper. It's 85 grams per square meter. It's a bit more textured. It's not ceramic coated like Rhodia. It's not steamroller smooth like Clairefontaine. And it can handle inks a lot of times that other papers can't. And this is definitely one of them, but one of the strange things is, and I've never encountered this before, it started to warp the page around the scrubbies. Do you see how like the page is moving? Yeah, it put down so much ink that it warped the paper. Yeah. Now, as you can probably see in the writing, we have a lovely halo effect, and we have it in the scrubby, but I think even on here we can see it in the writing. There's like this dark outline. It's very pleasant. It retains this very bright shade of blue. The extra fine took 13 seconds. The broad took 23. Again, this was really, really wet flowing. Yeah, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. Or, well, there kind of is. I know I'm not going to get it on camera, but it's like microscopic red haziness around the outside of the halos. But, yeah. Oh, my camera's doing that thing where it hates blue. There, you can kind of see it. Not that there's much left in the first place. It really washed away. It's very thin. It dyed the page. It would not be easy to recover, but I guess it depends on how motivated you are. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. And as I say down here, I feel like this is a page from approaching the bottom of the block because we do have some problems right along the edge. Again, think of it as a slow leak in your car because everywhere else is just fine. But there we do have a couple of problems. So yeah. But yeah, here, again, we have that wonderful halo effect. Again, we have like this microscopic sheen that I know I'm not going to get on camera. There's just not enough of it. The extra fine took 14 seconds. The broad took 23. Yeah, and it's pretty good. Except for these weird bits of feathering and the scrubby where I push through the paper. That's pretty much it. That's the only problem. So pretty much all of this is human error or environmental factors. Very well behaved in that regard. Now, there, you can kind of see it. Most of it washed away. And it did kind of explode a bit, but yeah, it's that would be the opposite of fun to try and recover. Next up is Tomoe River paper, which is known for drawing out sheen and shading and dry times, and it did. That wet flow and that wet extra fine took 19 seconds, and the broad took 34. I usually stop counting at 30, but I don't know, it looked like it was nearly there, so I kept counting. So yeah, we got a wonderful outline here, wonderful halo, and I wish I could get this on camera. Come on, camera, don't you want to play today? It's a very small bit of sheen, but it is lovely. Oh, maybe here. Camera? No. Here. The T. No. Oh, well. Okay, well, I tried. It's still very bright, and even though it you know, because of the way this paper makes ink pool, it can look thinner. It does not look watery or undersaturated. It does not ever look as though it needs more ink in that ink. Oh, my camera's doing that weird glowy thing it's doing. Anyways, as I say, the dry times were quite long. But that's something I feel like if you are familiar with Tomoe River, you would expect. It is known for doing that. And then this is an extremely wet flow. So, and then a broad, I feel like if you apply logic, you'll understand what you're getting yourself into. Now, this paper is known for letting ink slide away when you add more water, and it most certainly did. This dark band you see up at the top is just from where that pool of water I was using to do the water test sort of sat. And then when I went to clean it up, I guess I didn't mop all of it up, so yeah. But despite this being a very light blue, where it's laid on thick enough, you do get maybe a little bit of echo because this paper is just so darn thin. Now, for the next 3 tests, I only use that extra fine except to write the name. However, that's not doing it any amazing favors because that extra fine was wet flowing and this ink was wet flowing, and so we're still going to get kind of a disaster. So we definitely get spread. I mean, if you look at the line width here versus here, it's quite spready, and we don't get any shading, as you can see from the scrubby. It took 2.5 seconds to dry. It's quite woolly looking. It's got like a woolliness to it, and yeah, the wet flow in the already kind of wet pen, and we're having problems here. But granted, this is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. Chances are anything else in the world is at least a step above this stuff. Now, this is more absorbent paper, tends to suck the ink in, make it harder to wash out. And it kind of did that. I mean, what remains is a bit darker, but it's also very explodey and feathery. That would be the opposite of fun to try and recover. I mean, oh, look at that, letters are overlapping. Now, next up is Mead Notebook Paper. It's very cheap, you can buy it in pharmacies. And lately, it's thinner than 20-pound copier paper, but lately it's been outperforming the 20-pound copier paper. Here, the last couple weeks, it's been doing something weird. It's been feathering. Like, kind of intensely, which I don't really understand. And then here I say that, like, oh, it's bleeding like crazy. But then if we compare it to 20-pound copier paper, it's practically not bleeding at all. And if we compare it to the back of Moleskine, it's definitely not bleeding at all. But yeah, even here you can see it's hazy. It doesn't break all the way through. It never rendered onto the page below. So there's that at least. And there is some spread, but it's not nearly as bad. So I guess in some ways it did outperform it. It took 2 seconds to dry on here. We don't get any shading. And this paper does tend to react very violently when you add water. So yeah, that reaction is actually kind of typical for this paper. It feathered and exploded, and it started to overlap, and that is a exploding cactus nightmare. Now lastly is Moleskine paper, which I hate because it hates ink. And here it most certainly did. But I mean, again, this is a wet extra fine, and then it was a wet ink, but still, I mean, look at how gross that looks. That's just a nightmare. Took 3 seconds to dry, which I can't explain because obviously it seeped in. And I gave you a... Oh. I mean, look at that. You can practically read that. And that's with a bright light coming in this direction. It's not like you're reading it through. Oh, that is just nasty. I don't think they play well together. And then the water test is unlike anything we've seen before. It just absolutely exploded. There we go. Yeah, it's, I mean, actually the camera's clearing that up a little bit. In person, I can't read it, and I know what it says because I wrote it, so, yeah, so, there you go. There's Diamine's Aqua Blue. It is essentially like every other turquoise in existence. Yep. It's very light, but it's never undersaturated. It has some brightness to it. My sample was unbelievably wet. If you are familiar with this ink, if you have it, I'd kind of like to know if it's always like that, because hot damn, that was insane. So yeah, if you know anything, leave a comment down below. Yeah, so for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.